Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our last panel of today with an extremely interesting title, which is Maximizing Performances and Impact of Digital Reps. So the digital rep is most probably the new entity coming from the sales and medical rep. And today it's really glad to welcome from East, Marcus West from 60 Seconds. Hi Marcus, how are you?
Very well, thanks Dario.
It's pretty late at your place, right? Okay. And Alexey Cherchago from Sandoz. Hi Alexey, how are you?
Hi Dario, I'm good.
So gentlemen, let's deep dive into the conversation. And the first question which we prepared for today's conversation is how well do we know our customers, or in particular the HCPs, but also of course other stakeholders. So let's start with you, Alexey.
It's really a great question, Dario, a very good one. Yeah, and can we imagine that if we could reach HCPs at the right time, with the right content, via relevant channels, which they prefer, right? This content would go beyond offering drugs to combat different illnesses and provide insight on services and tools that help physicians in their daily tasks. Moreover, we would have a solid analytical support and data demonstrating what is relevant for our customers and what doesn't work, to be able to change rapidly our engagement approach, right? To have this future, we should spend time and resources to get to know our customers. We have a lot of changes in R&D over the last decades. Our commercial models remain quite similar until last year. The more we know our audience, the more segmented and relevant the content will be for them, the better for our customers, right? Physicians no longer demand the same. There is, so to say, an asymmetry of expectations, different people would like at different times. And pharma companies will have to adapt to these demands of the physicians and meet their needs. There is an increasing importance of pull touch points, right? We discussed in a couple of previous panels. For many tasks, HCPs simply don't need rep support. And at the same time, there is decrease of impact and access for push touch points. That doesn't go along with our engagement models organized predominantly around push interactions. I think that we should rebalance push and pull, right? Therefore, to be relevant for our customers, it's important to have a clarity about what channels they prefer and what content might be of interest for them. I believe that we should not force any types of engagement, either face-to-face or digital. It's important to be, so to say, agile in reaction to what customers want. According to recent McKinsey survey, I think it's from February or from March, 3/4 of our customers are reporting a mismatch between preferred and actual channel mix. This probably reflects significant room for improvement on customer knowledge and answers partially your question, right? To summarize, value-added interactions remain in place. The way of engagement and the role of rep may further evolve, and I would say importance of customer knowledge is increasing. If we know well our customers, we can better direct resources to what matters and drive positive customer experience.
Thank you, Alexey. If you ask me, we definitely speak about experience, right? Okay, Marcus, the same question?
Yeah, look, I think we are asked an awful lot in relation to the work we do with MSLs and with reps. How do we help reps? How do we coach MSLs to more effectively listen? And I think it's an interesting question because often when we think of communication skills, we always concentrate on what's coming out of our mouth and the messaging that we're delivering. But I think increasingly we're understanding that the ability to listen to actively listen, and to also then use effectively our CRM to take pertinent, detailed notes on the HCPs that we interact with, so that the conversation that we're having has a sense of continuum. So I think that deep respect for the person that we're talking to listen to them properly, and then to recall information about them and their specific interests is something that we're seeing as a really big focus for organisations currently.
Thank you, Marcos. Next question: how to keep field teams engaged and productive? The $1 million question. Alexey, you're managing Europe, so how do you keep the teams engaged and productive?
Actually, Marcos already mentioned a couple of things, right, which are critical and important, and I would like to add maybe a bit broader perspective, because let me start with the fundamental change in culture today being driven increasingly by purpose, right, not by control. And while shifting into we call it new next normal, right, overall performance management should be thoroughly reviewed to reflect these cultural changes and actually changes in the rep role. This is exactly one of the sources, I would say, of frustration for customer-facing colleagues when they observe a mismatch between performance management KPIs and strategic priorities, which they obtain from back office. For example, the change in customer engagement expectations and more personalization imply moving away from sales performance metrics only towards impact measurements. Yeah. To put it simple, we need KPIs that reflect and recognize how well the needs of the customers are met. And tracking such metrics currently is quite sophisticated, sometimes extremely expensive, but there are some approaches here. You know, we can, for example, use surveys at the end of the remote interactions, or some types of primary market research to get insights around customer satisfaction. Actually, we discussed it in previous panels. We touched it a bit, right? We should also think about team and collaboration KPIs reflecting shared goals, right? Such KPIs should be introduced, and I would say they should reflect objectives above roles and above territory borders, so to say. Yeah. Then, as soon as we are moving to a completely different level of autonomy for sales representatives, coaching-related and teamwork KPIs, as well as KPIs driving collaboration, are getting quite important here. Yeah. Maybe additional point about personalization. More personalization and engagement requires significant change for marketing and SAP functions, right, which should focus now on customer engagement rather than specific brands and product portfolios. Personalization of back office support for our sales representatives is also expected by reps, right? Otherwise, it's really difficult to handle multidimensional questions from HCPs. And the probably last point from my side would be we should clearly identify what capabilities will be critical in the mid-term perspective to ensure successful engagement with HCPs. We will discuss it probably a bit later, like emotional intelligence, you know, high responsiveness, which we already discussed, agile mindset, and provide appropriate support to train these capabilities with field forces.
Thank you, Alexey. Marcos, same question. However, I would like to reshape the question and maybe ask it in the way how to coach the field teams to keep them engaged and productive. And you really have a lot of experience with that particular one.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting and challenging question. I think the reason it's so challenging is because I think often the people who end up in roles managing teams have often been the best sales performers. Now, does that endow them with the coaching capability required to nurture and to develop and to create a plan and deliver on that plan iteratively over time to develop individual people, different people within their teams. And generally speaking, the answer is a resounding no. So a lot of sales managers are selected because it's naturally the next step up. But the skill of a salesperson, a really good salesperson, is often very, very different to the skills of a good sales manager. And so I think that would be the first observation that I'd make. And then I think just in terms of one second and final point would be, how do we continue the touch points with the members of our team to iteratively improve them over time? How do we create a plan for an individual and create little lily pads along the way, little touch points where we can continue to nurture and develop them to the point where they no longer require us?
Thank you, Marcos. Alexey, back to you. How does successful engagement look like these days? And maybe to add and build on that, how it will look like in the next normal?
Maybe first of all, the first part, right? I would say that
exactly.
I would say that like Marcus mentioned, that it is definitely about natural two-way ongoing conversation between reps and their customers. I think that what is extremely important, critical, is high responsiveness to customer requests, and it's getting to be a kind of hygiene factor. Taking into the consideration, challenges with access, the rep should play a role of solution provider rather than, a message transmitter. If they're able to keep continuous, consistent discussion, then they have really good chances to keep relationship with their customers, including personal touch points. The second point from my side, which I would like to mention, come back to this emotional intelligence, including empathy, right? And what is interesting that if you really would like to understand what are the needs of your customers, it is definitely possible to do even with significant lack of access, right? And customer centricity without this empathy component can hardly be in place. And last but not least, it's successful engagement is driven by ability of a rep to distill complex, I would say, messages, information into small, simple pieces, and the ability to use efficiently information and recommendations generated by the central analytical team and systems, some software pieces in real time, I don't know, using machine learning, AI technologies, and so on, right? This is exactly the last point. I would say it's a bridge between what we have now and what maybe we will have in the midterm perspective, because complexity is huge. There are a lot of channels, a lot of different requests, quite high degree of personalization, without proper support and being able at least to know who to ask and when. It would be really, really difficult to keep this continuum of communication. I think that in the midterm perspective here, we are talking probably about 12, 18 months. We should focus on proper support from the side of the tools, right? Definitely, it's extremely important, first of all, to understand what is relevant, what capabilities we need to ensure with our customer-facing colleagues, and provide proper infrastructure around different processes and systems which can help them to address quite broad spectrum of requests from healthcare practitioners.
Thank you, Alexey. Marcos?
Yes, Dario, thank you. Look, I think I could sum it up as saying quality as opposed to quantity. I think often when we run sales coaching initiatives and initiatives around communication skills for MSLs, we see a call flow where certain steps are worked through by the salesperson or the MSL during an interaction with an HCP. And, you know, I think that can often create a framework which delivers a certain amount of pressure to move at speed through content. Whereas I think somebody who's a little more experienced will realise that there's a certain window of opportunity to explore 2 or 3 ideas, maybe only one idea, thoroughly and in detail and carefully, and in an interaction that is able to breathe and doesn't feel rushed. I think that is enormously important. And the second point that I would make is when a rep or an MSL properly connects to purpose, i.e. understanding the plight and the condition and the affliction of the patient, then that means that they are appropriately oriented to be able to engage in a way that is far more effective, in a way that really has cut through because of the meaningfulness with which the messaging is delivered and with which the interaction is undertaken.
Thank you, Marcos. Alexey, Marcos, really great conversation, and I would also like to thank to the audience for taking part in our first ever next masterclass, which this time was all about omnichannel. We will put all those recordings on our official YouTube channel, so if you missed some of brilliant sessions, feel free to subscribe and to watch them later on. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Of course, all speakers, VIIHEALTH as a sponsor, all people who, of course, listened and watched that live. And please proceed to the networking, to the exhibition, where you can meet some very interesting solution vendors with some good offerings. So again, Marcos, Alexey, thank you very much. Take very good care, and hopefully we see each other next year in lovely Dubrovnik.
Thanks, Dario.
Thank you, Dario.